at 6:30. And so feel free to mingle around, look at the maps, continue to talk. Bathrooms, if you need them, are right through this door. There's a men and women's bathroom. But we'll get started in about 7 minutes.
Yeah, he said, did you send him the link or what? He said, should be the same link it always is, so. Okay. Just PV, right? Yeah. Yeah, he's here now. Alright. Yeah, because I'm here with him. Alright. Thank you. I didn't know. I'm not saying. I mean, right? No, reset the stream. Is there a link? Or I can do Facebook or something from here? Yeah, the other. Well, I mean, but how? Because it's just a link, right? Yeah, because you sent me the link yesterday. Yeah. And I think that will keep coming up. Yes. That's what one reason. I mean, for the digital paper here.
That'd be great. And then won't have to beat me across the floor.
It'll play good anyway.
Okay.
Eliminate some jobs.
Hey.
Oh, you again? There you go.
Oh, it's only those self-planned.
See that right there? Tell me when I get to the Okay. Said stop.
We'll see. Maybe we can rekindle that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, if we can go ahead and start finding our seats, we're going to start our meeting. Just by way of reminder, there are bathrooms directly out this door, men and women's. And if you need them at any time, you can slide out the side door either way and go. We are on target tonight at 6:30 right now. We're on target to finish by 8 o'clock. I will tell you this before we even start. There are going to be plenty of volunteers here after 8 o'clock to take down additional questions, concerns, comments, opinions, thoughts, you name it. So this is the first of 5 public meetings. The intent is we need you to talk. We want to listen to you tonight in full course. And I say that in light of people being here after 8 o'clock is that the way that the forum is laid out, you might not get a chance to. And so I want you to know we're going to stay here as long as we need to get everybody's opinions and thoughts. So, that being the case, let me dive in and we'll start our meeting tonight. My name is Hunter Hall. I'm the president of the Covington-Newton Chamber of Commerce. And I'll be facilitating our 5 public meetings. Let me tell you why. Why me? Why the Chamber? Quite candidly, we're the only entity in the Leadership Collaborative that will not be overseeing any of the ordinances. We're not a government municipality. We're not Board of Commissioners who will be exercising or implementing. Our job, obviously, is to sell the county. And so from that standpoint, as we deal with these ordinances, I'm the facilitator. As we have 530, give or take, businesses that are chamber members. We represent them on a daily basis. We deal with the private sector all the time. We deal with government and the public sector all the time. And so in facilitating this, my job is to bring both perspectives to the table, represent both entities, and have a very candid professional dialogue in that respect. Also, I do want you to know the Chamber has been involved in the Leadership Collaborative, which I'll tell you about here in just a minute, for 10 years. I personally have been at the table for the past 4. And part of the Chamber's specific role and responsibility is to represent the private sector and our Chamber members, specifically as it pertains to economic development. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm your facilitator, and we'll drive forward from there. Before we start, I want to say thank you to our Board of Education, specifically Principal Erica Anderson, for hosting us. The BOE has provided 5 schools over the next 6 weeks that we'll be meeting in. So we want to thank you, specifically Corey Craven. Is Corey here? Why not? Corey's been our go-to during this whole time. So anyway, next thing on the agenda, real quick. If you're an elected official, Board of Commissioners, any of the municipalities, BOE, Sewer Water Authority, if you just raise your hand. You don't have to stand up, not ask you to speak, anything like that. All right, I just want our citizens to make sure they know you're here, that you're engaged and you're listening. So thank you for being here. Let me talk about how tonight's going to flow out before we dive in. Everyone should have gotten a little square piece of paper when you walked in. This is how tonight's going to kind of unroll, and initially this is how we're going to run all 5 public sessions. Unless you tell us, hey, this is a horrible way to do it, then we'll tweak it. All right? We're obviously going to do the introduction, and we're going to talk a little bit about the baseline ordinances. We want you to hear from the consultants as to what they are, what they mean, and the implications that they play for you as landowners and residents of the county. Then we will transition to Q&A. That Q&A time will be done. Up here we'll have a microphone. We're going to bring you over here to your right, and we'll have questions. Let me be real clear about this. These are questions. We are going to have a time after Q&A to make statements. Meaning, please don't phrase a statement in the form of a question. We are representing 100,000 residents in these 5 public sessions, and we want to give the residents opportunity to ask questions specific to the baseline ordinances, the 2050 plan, the intent, what it means for your individual property, things of that nature. And so we'll be facilitating questions. The consultants will be taking answers. Then, after a period of 30 minutes, we will open it up for statements. This is a time set aside for you to specifically make a statement in reference to your opinions on the plan, or your support of it, your concerns for it, suggestions you might have for it. Every suggestion, every question, I'll be crystal clear on this. Every statement, every question will be taken in, considered as we look at the second version of the draft of the baseline ordinances. That being said, let me speak to this fact. This is a draft. I know there's a lot of emotion, even as I sit around and talk to people coming in between 6 and 6:30. I say, hey, what brought you here? I'll tell you what brought me here. You know, there's a lot of passion in this, and we understand it. That's why we're having 5 public input meetings. We want your passion. We want your questions. We want your concerns. Because we're in the first version of a draft that will have a second draft, and we'll have a third draft. We want and need your opinions, your perspectives, and suggestions to create the best possible draft version that our elected bodies can vote on. So, that makes sense? We know the 10 and 20 acre issue is a big issue. We know housing density is a big issue. As I talk to people who live over here in the western side of the district, District 2 and 3, they're saying, how can you push this much density on me? Do you know what Salem Road is like? Have you ever driven it at 5 o'clock? That's the kind of discussion we need. I love it. That's why we're here. So thanks for coming. So that's how we're going to run it. Everyone should have received an index card when you got here. Did anybody not? Perfect. You got an index card and a pencil. You got one. Can you help us, Dylan? Index cards and pencils. Please write every question that you have on your index card. Any statement that you have. Any concern that you have. And we'll be taking those up at the end of the night so that we can start building a good frequently asked questions section and we can address your concerns. All right. Make sense? Any questions so far? We rolling? All right. Let's talk about it. What are the baseline ordinances? Where did it come from? And why are we doing this? All right, one thing I want you to understand, the baseline ordinances that we're presenting you tonight are the exact baseline ordinances that the elected officials have been reviewing, that their professional staff have been reviewing, and the stakeholders team has been reviewing. Point being, you are seeing everything fully transparent and fully visible just like everybody else has. All right? It's really critical. We're not trying to hide anything. There's not a A team that's putting this together that's trying to move something and hide it under a shell. What you're seeing is what everybody's seeing, and we're going to roll that through all the way through this process. All right, so where did it come from? Let's discuss this. The collaboration started in 2005, and I'll come back and unpack that in just a second. But here are the members of the Leadership Collaborative. And this is a collaborative group that grew very organically out of some significant growth in our county. Represented in the collaborative is the Newton County Board of Commissioners, the Water and Sewage Authority, the Board of Education, the cities of Covington, Oxford, Porterdale, Mansfield, and New Bern, as well as the Covington-Newton Chamber of Commerce. I cannot stress to you how important and how significant this collaborative group is. Let me unpack it a little bit as to why we began to meet and what it means for us. This is a little infographic of the growth of Newton County from 1960 to 2010. In these 50 years represented on this chart, the United States grew by 42% population growth. The Southeast region grew by 54%. Georgia, as a state, in and of itself, grew by 59%. Metro Atlanta, 75%, and Newton County grew by 79% over those 50 years. That is significant growth. We outpaced the U.S., the Southeast, and the state of Georgia in that growth. Here's what this looks like on a personal level. If you were here, how many of y'all lived here in 1960? You had 20,000 residents. You have seen enormous change in this county. Overwhelming. To the tune that you have plus north of 100,000 residents 50 years later. That's significant, massive growth. We were the 8th fastest growing, and in a 36-month period, we became the 16th most stressed community, according to USA Today. And that, if my memory is right, was based on foreclosure rates. Significant growth, significant crash. Now, the question is, what do we do with the growth? Were we not planning for it? Were we not prepared for it? Did we have our head in the sand? What was happening? We were planning, very much so. Department of Community Affairs required every county to submit a master land use plan. We were doing it. Board of Commissioners, City of Covington, other towns were participating in it. Ironically, guess who was not at the table? Schools or wastewater? Now, we can all look at that and think, are you kidding me? Serious? Our school board was not present in a comprehensive land use plan. Sewer and Water Authority was not active and engaged in that planning. The two bigger users, two significant users, specifically schools, of our tax digest. We had to bring them to the table. And that's what's significant about this collaborative. It's not that we're anything special. It's not that we're anything, we're not special. We're just people trying to figure out how do we plan for growth that was 79% over 50 years. And this was kind of the mantra. When good people do nothing, bad things can happen. But when good people work together, good things can and do happen. And we're saying, hey, we're not perfect. We're not Einstein. But you know what? We got a problem. We've got to at least put our hands to the plow, put the plow in the dirt, and let's figure something out. And so that's what we started doing back in 2005. So this is the process that started back then. All the Newton County governments, all the different municipalities, Sewer Water Authority, BOE, and the Chamber began sharing ideas, talking about and understanding growth and change, the demographics, income levels, retail needs, lack thereof, job creation, industrial manufacturing, so on and so forth. And then we started thinking, well, how do we grow in a way that's responsible, that's sustainable? I love it. We often hear that term sustainable, and we think, I used to think, Greenpeace tree huggers, right? Then somebody made the analogy, do you brush your teeth? You're practicing sustainability. And when you think about a community that grew from 20,000 to 100,000 residents in 50 years, the question has to be, can we sustain this? How are we brushing our teeth? Are we flossing? What does that look like? What are we going to do? And so that's where the process began. And then the plan began to take shape. Now, the plan, the collaborative didn't start meeting to build a master land use plan. We started meeting to say, hey, how do we handle this growth? We've had huge explosive growth in the county. I think if you read the op-ed piece that I wrote, we talked about Alcovey High School locating on the southern part of the county and what the increased cost to taxpayers was to transport students all the way down there. That was significant cost increase. And so how do we plan? How do we make better decisions? How do we learn from our past? And that's where the 2050 plan began to come into place. Now let me ask you this. When you have 80% growth, 79% growth over a 50-year period, can we agree that it is wise to have a plan? Can we all be on the same page here? Okay, thank you. So from that standpoint, the plan began to develop. We've got to figure this thing out. And in 2010, all those different entities that are represented in the collaborative came together and signed this resolution that I have to my right. All the different commissioners, all the different city council members, the chamber board of directors, sewer and water authority board, so on and so forth. BOE came and signed this agreement that said basically, hey, we have resolved to work towards these principles. And here's what the issue was. We're going to work towards a goal of an exceptional quality of life for every citizen. Every citizen, east, west, north, south. And we're going to base those things on 4 principles. Those 4 principles were clean water, compact communities, shared infrastructure, all right, and then transportation corridors. We needed to make sure all of those are working for us as we built this plan. Let me talk about quality of life, just a quick word on this. Every one of us in this room are going to define quality of life in a totally different way. Completely different way. Because we all have different value systems. Now, regardless, at the end of the day, they generally fall into a couple camps. Some it's recreation, that's your quality of life. Some it's schools, that's how you define quality of life. Others it's jobs, your job, or creating more jobs. Others it might be shopping, restaurants, entertainment aspects. Others it could be green space. You're going to define it however you want. But one common aspect is your quality of life is going to be dependent on your community leadership working together to facilitate that. And that's really what this plan came out to and started working. So, that being the case, I've already hit these principles, but I want to reiterate them. The principles that the plan, the 2050 plan, and thus the baseline ordinance has been built on is this. Protect our clean water. We have a lot of natural resources running through our county. Second, create quality communities that people can engage, people know each other, you know what I mean. Create connecting corridors, make sure we don't have the infrastructure and traffic problems that some of our neighbors do, and coordinate public investment. Let me explain what that means very briefly. Coordinating public investment is, hey, if we're going to put a school here, let's make sure the roads are prepared for it. If the roads are there, we need the infrastructure of sewer, water, gas lines. We need to make sure all those are in place. If we're going to do a development over here, who's paying for those things? Let's coordinate those things. At the end of the day, that's tax dollar savings for us. And so this was the conclusion of the plan, or this is the model of the plan that was created based on those principles. So anyway, and what we've asked the consultants to do, and they present tonight, is basically create ordinances, which is zoning and development regs and construction standards that reflect that map. This is draft 1. This is why you're here, is to say, don't like it, love it. How do we make it happen? How do we get rid of it? Have you thought about this? Can we change this? All right, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. The consultants have done what the Leadership Collaborative consultants or a team have asked them to do, and now we're in to beat it up, figure it out, and let's come out with a product. I like the way that the analogy was given to me today that I think is very fitting. If we were going to build a grocery store, you might hire a consultant to come in and say, hey, what do I need in here in a traditional grocery store that's going to move product? And the consultant's going to go do a study. They're going to say, here's what you need on these shelves. This is what kinds you need for bread, beans, produce, milk, dairy. These are everything you need. The consultant comes back to you, and you say, all right, that makes sense. But I can't do all 4 of them. I can only do 4 sets of beans instead of 6. I can only carry 2 lines of bread instead of 4. You're the end user. Citizens of Newton County, you're the end user. And so that's the public format. That's the engagement that we need for you tonight, is to discuss those things, to see what the store ends up looking like. All right, let me introduce our consulting team real quick. Caleb Rossico is our code writer. With us tonight is Royce Hansen. He'll be handling the transfer development rights presentation. Our strategic advisor is Randy Rourke, who's worked with us a lot on retail as well as some other land plan and technical services from the Center for Community Preservation, Kay Lee and Adam Kerr. So with that said, let me introduce Caleb, and he'll take us through our next presentation.
Thank you, Hunter. Good evening, everyone. So we're here tonight to talk about the 2050 Plan Baseline Ordinance. But before we do that, I wanted to give everyone a very good analogy on what exactly this ordinance is and what exactly it means relevant to the principles that Hunter talked about. We have created what we call a baseline ordinance to really be a starting point for discussion on the future of development in both Newton County and the cities within it. What we have done is to create a template, if you will, that really is a starting point. This model ordinance is really like the process you go through when you buy a car. You have the opportunity to buy a standard model that has all the basic elements to implement your vision for your car, or in this case, the vision for the 2050 plan. But then you, as individual communities, also have the opportunity to customize and create upgrades. And you can add chrome wheels, you can add GPS, you can add tinted windows, you can add all of these different things that reflect your individual values. This approach is really what we mean when we talk about baseline ordinances. Now, one of the other things about this baseline ordinance process that is very important to understand is that we have created a draft of what is called a Unified Development Ordinance. Essentially, what this means is that we are proposing to combine zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, and development regulations into a single document. The purpose is to remove any contradictions between them, and very importantly, to create a basic level playing field for development activity throughout the county. The idea is to go from a series of very diverse and sometimes contradictory regulations to a regulation that is business-friendly, user-friendly, and very importantly, implements the plan of the vision. Now, I cannot stress enough what Hunter has already told you, but as the code writer, I want to emphasize it again, that this ordinance that we have prepared is a draft. It has been built to realize the 2050 plan vision and the four principles within it. But absolutely nothing within this draft is set in stone. It is a starting point for discussion, and we know that it needs work. We know, as we've heard, for example, that certain areas have generated a lot of conversation, and that is somewhat intentional. In my 15 years of code writing throughout the region, I have found that one of the best ways to get people really involved in making decisions on what is going to be important to the future of their community is to actually give them something to respond to. And so the fact that so many of you have turned out tonight, you've been having conversations offline, you've been writing emails, you've been talking to your elected official, really indicates to me that that is in fact happening. So, what in fact is in the ordinance? Well, the 2050 Plan Baseline Ordinance really incorporates most of the elements that the cities and counties already have in their development regulations today. We have taken those diverse parts of the code and actually put them into a single 200-page document organized into 16 different articles. Now, with one exception that I'll let Royce talk about shortly, all of these are more or less existing provisions that the cities or the county have in their regulations today. However, in order to implement the 2050 Plan vision, we have found that there are certain areas where we needed to make some proposed changes to the ordinances. These are highlighted here in red. Generally speaking, they fall into the category of creating some new zoning districts to provide for the type of development envisioned in the 2050 Plan. Calls for provisions for transfer development rights, which you'll hear about shortly. And very importantly, calls for some additional cleanup to remove inconsistencies in various parts of the code. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of these right now again because this is a 200-page document. But I did want to just point out what some of the major significant highlights are. One of the first areas that the changes have been made is in Article 2. Article 2 is the part of the ordinance that talks about the rules and provisions. One of the big changes in this area that we have done is to propose in these new zoning districts that would be created that we think about regulating building type. The idea in the 2050 plan is to create compact communities. And one of the things that we've heard is that compact invariably requires more consideration, more thought about design. And so we felt that creating districts that address building type and defining those types in Article 2 would be a way to do it. One of the other major changes in some of these new districts is this idea of changing how we think about density today. Today, if I'm going to build a residential product in the county, I have a basic rule of units per acre, and then my commercial is determined by my setbacks. In this particular code, we have said, okay, we're going to propose to create some new zoning districts that would only be applied in certain parts of the area identified in the 2050 plan. Within these new zoning districts, we would propose to keep all density at what it currently is today, but to create a mechanism, again, transfer development rights, to allow you to increase density in those areas by transferring development permission from one part of the county to another. So that approach, that concept of creating a base density and requiring any increase in density to go through the TDR process is another major change. Then we get into the new zoning districts. The first set of zoning districts that we've proposed to create are what we're calling the rural and conservation districts. These are the areas where we have initially proposed a 10 and 20 acre minimum lot size. We know, again, that is a very contentious issue and we're here to listen to you. However, this district does more than just that. This particular district has also been written in such a way that it allows people to elect to cluster development. So if I have a 100-acre property, this code would give me an opportunity to, rather than develop all of my 100 acres, to concentrate the development in a smaller portion of the lot and preserve the remainder of the property through a clustering mechanism. The code also includes the creation of 3 new residential districts. Each of these residential districts includes site and lot standards and landscaping and building design standards. The idea here is that rather than creating subdivisions in compact communities, we really want to create towns, neighborhoods, and places that have more design detail than you've currently been achieving today. This particular code has been proposed to do that. And again, this is one of those areas that we've heard some concern based on some of the specific design standards. In addition, the code includes in Article 5 where you will find the proposed standards for new corridor and center districts. We have proposed creating 5 new, essentially commercial and mixed-use districts that could be scaled to context. Within those, we have proposed the ability for individual jurisdictions to customize their height, their landscaping standards, and their building standards. But the idea is, again, to create tools that will allow for the creation of walkable town centers or neighborhood centers rather than just conventional strip malls, office parks, and the like. And then we get into Article 7. Now, Article 7 is one of the absolutely most important parts of this baseline ordinance. We know, and I know as someone who has written about 36 zoning codes and development regulations across the Southeast, that this baseline ordinance must have a way to allow people who are in neighborhoods that are currently built out, or have subdivisions that are built out, or office areas that are built out, or manufacturing areas that are built out, to continue to operate under those current regulations. In order to do that, we have proposed to carry over verbatim all of those existing development regulations in what we're calling Legacy District in Article 7 of the Code. So if you are zoned R1 today, or R2, or community commercial, or a certain district in Oxford, or a certain district in Porterdale, and the city and the community want to keep that district, this gives an opportunity to carry over those districts verbatim and incorporate them into the ordinance. Article 8, following that, is about TDR, Transfer Development Rights, which Royce will talk about in a moment. And then Article 9 is the part of the code that talks about use provisions. Now, as I think about your development regulations today from an investor perspective, and I was coming to Newton County to put in a certain type of business, one of the first things I would do would be to look at your zoning regulations and determine where my businesses are allowed. Now, if I do that today, I'm going to get a different definition for what my business is in Oxford, in Porterdale, in the city of Covington, or in the county. That's not the best idea for someone who is interested in investing in your community. One of the important parts of this Unified Development Ordinance is that we have gone through every single list of permitted uses in the county, and we have proposed to consolidate and make them consistent across the board so that people who want to invest in your community, who want to know where certain businesses or certain housing types are allowed, can know that in the individual communities, those terms will be understandable and, more importantly, common. Now, this is also one of those areas of the code that we know a lot of local customization is going to have to occur. Because, again, there are certain districts, certain uses, certain types of housing that may not be appropriate everywhere, but the individual jurisdictions will be able to work with. Article 11 of the code is site development. In this area, you will find standards for parking and etc. One of the major changes here is that we have proposed to incorporate no minimum parking requirements. The idea being here that businesses and investors and developers know what kind of parking they need to provide in order to let their business work properly. If I am Walmart, or if I am Publix, or if I am Target, I know that I need 3.5 to 5 spaces per thousand. And the government should not be in the position of telling businesses how much parking they need to provide to work. So what we have proposed here is that we actually take out the parking requirements and allow them to be dedicated and controlled by the individual businesses. In this part of the code, you'll also find the buffer requirements, which we've carried over verbatim, lighting requirements, and other requirements. Article 12 of the code is subdivision. Not a lot of changes here, other than in certain parts of the code, we talk about creating smaller block sizes, interconnected streets, access requirements, and street network requirements. Article 13 is the environmental part of the code. Here you'll find all your current requirements for stormwater, wetland protection, stream buffers, etc. But you'll also find some new requirements. It was mentioned earlier that the Water and Sewage Authority is a partner in this process. And one of the things that we worked on and put in this draft were potential landscape water conservation measures so that public water, water that's been treated, water that is available for consumption, is not wasted excessively on landscaping. In addition, we have proposed caveats for that, so it wouldn't apply to agricultural or single-family homes. It would be primarily a commercial provision. So that, in a nutshell, is the 200-page baseline ordinance overview of content. Now, as I've mentioned, we have already heard to date a lot of concerns. We are absolutely aware and willing to work with you on the issues of 10 and 20. We have heard a lot of concern about what that means, how that impacts property, how that impacts the ability to do child lots, how that impacts the ability of people who have farms to cash in on their retirement. And that is one of those areas, among all of the areas, in fact, that we know is going to be an issue. In addition, we've also heard that some of the design provisions in the new districts might be a bit onerous. And again, we're willing to listen. We put them out so that we could get feedback, and we really, truly do want to get that feedback. Part of the purpose of tonight's meeting will be to hear from you on any other issues that you may have concern about, so that I, the code writer, can be aware of them, so that the consultant team can be aware of them, and very importantly, so that we can respond to them in future versions of the ordinance. But one of the biggest points of discussion has certainly been the issue of TDR. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hanson to talk very briefly about that.
I want to interject real quick. Come on up, Mr. Royce. When you signed in, if you wanted to make public comment, we'd ask you to check a box. I only have 2 people signed up so far. That's probably not reflective of the whole, I guess. Adam, can we get that sign-up sheet and float it? Because I think more people will want to. So I just want to make that announcement real quick. And this presentation that Mr. Royce is going to do, he will also be doing Thursday night in a much more expanded version at Mansfield Elementary. So that's forward.
Thank you, Hunter. I get to do the non-controversial part of this presentation. So, I'm going to do a very short presentation this evening, and on Thursday evening, a much longer one. And I'm sure there'll be questions here, and I'm willing to stay late too and talk to people. So, first of all, what is a TDR, a transferable development right? It's a property right to develop one residence or a specific amount of non-residential floor area that a landowner can transfer by sale or gift to be used in the development of a different property. Think of your property rights as a bundle of sticks. One of those sticks is a right to develop on the land. One of them is a right to own. One of them is a right to dispose of the property, and so on. So a development right is that right to develop something. What a TDR does is allow that right to develop to be moved from one piece of property to another piece of property. When a TDR is transferred, an easement is placed on the property from which it is transferred that restricts the development of that property to no more than the number of units that could be developed under the zoning on that property. So how does the system work? We look at your map of the 2050 plan. You would have sending areas in the rural and conservation areas, the light green and dark green areas on the map. In the receiving areas then are the areas that are designated for compact communities and for corridor development. An owner of land in one of the rural or conservation areas would have a development right for each 2.5 acres under the recommendations that we have made. And when a person buys those development rights from the owner of land, say a developer buys those development rights, it can develop one bonus unit for every development right that it purchases. If you think back for a moment at the slide that Caleb showed you of the baseline zoning in the compact communities, and then the bonus zoning, or the bonus development that is allowed above that baseline, that would be represented by the development rights that would be transferred. Here's an illustration of 1,000 acres. 1,000 acres with one development right for every 2.5 acres would have 400 TDRs. The owner of that land could also build 50 houses on that if it were zoned 1 for 20 acres as the base zone. So if you kept 50 development rights, 1 for each 20 acres, you would have 350 development rights to transfer to someone else. An easement would then be placed on the land that would protect 1,000 acres to no more than one house for every 20 acres, which would be a total of 50. going to the upper right on the chart, the developer buys those 350 acres and applies them to a parcel that he owns in a compact community or a corridor. If that parcel were 70-acre tract and it had a base density of 2 units, what have I got here? 5 units to the acre. He could build 350 houses. If he buys the development rights for 350 TDRs for bonus density, he could then build 700 units on that property. So TDRs basically produce the same amount of development, same number of houses or space that would occur all over the county, except that it has been placed on a smaller amount of land. Coming back to the landowner who has sold the development rights. He retains the right to develop 50 residences, so he has a basic option of 50 20-acre lots. Or he could use the cluster option and put those 50 lots on 20% of the land. And the fundamental point here is that with TDRs, one is able to sell off the development rights, achieve or retain the equity that one has in the land, which is essentially a land, in many cases, a landowner's retirement program, a legacy for children, or collateral when you go to the bank. But you can sell that and keep the land. So a working TDR system needs a market. That's why there's bonus density in the compact communities, so that all of that density, all that bonus density requires the developer to acquire TDRs to get that density. That's why the TDRs are provided in the rural and conservation areas, and the transaction is one in which the government is not involved. It's a private market transaction. The price of a TDR is established by what the seller is willing to sell it for and what the buyer is willing to buy it for. It will fluctuate with the market. The government does not set the prices for a TDR. The number of acres per TDR needs to be set by law. We've recommended 1 TDR for every 2.5 acres. The bonus density also has to be uniform and set by law, and we've recommended 1 residential unit or 4,000 square feet of non-residential development for each TDR. All bonus density in the compact communities and in the corridors requires the acquisition of TDRs instead of going through rezoning. And an easement then perpetually limits development on the property from which the TDRs have been sold. Now, to go to the question of why we recommended 10 and 20 acres. So I told somebody today when I was asked to come and talk and think about how to deal with TDRs, I wasn't asked to give us something that would guaranteed to make everybody happy. What I was asked is what would be my best recommendation to you to achieve the objectives that you want to achieve in the plan of protecting your water supply, protecting the Alcovy River, and of saving land that can be farmed for a long time in Newton County. My experience has been that if you don't have a low enough density, you ultimately end up with scattered development that fragments the land, makes it very difficult to farm, and also creates pollution that endangers your water supply and the quality of water in a river like the Alcove. So I recommended 20 acres as what makes sense to achieve that. And that 10 acres made sense, I thought, in the rural area. Again, the picture behind this is a 5-acre subdivision. I expect that most of you have got experience with subdivisions and farms, though they're not always too compatible. There's not a lot of hunting goes on in this area, and there's not a lot of farming that goes on. And the area around it has been fragmented so that it is very difficult to continue. This is a slide from my area up in the metropolitan Washington area. I'm from Montgomery County, which is on the north side of the river. We've had a transferable development rights program for 34 years now. We established it in 1980. We have protected most of our 93,000 acre agricultural reserve. We still have almost 600 farms. We've got 350 horticultural businesses that operate in the county. Loudoun County is right across the river from us, and 20 years ago, Loudoun County looked in this area just like Montgomery County. But it has not been able to control its sprawl, and it now looks like what you see there today. So that's why transferable development rights are included in the draft, and why we have recommended what we have. So we're eager to hear from you of how delirious you are in support of these proposals and what we can do to make the system work for you. So, Hunter?
Okay, we're going to start our Q&A time in this session. We have gone a little long on our presentations, and I think I'm the primary culprit, and I apologize, but we're going to definitely give you the time necessary to ask your questions. So here's how this is going to go. These are questions only. Our consultants will stay here on this mic. I'm going to work another mic, and I'll stand over here and manage that. Again, this is an issue that affects 100,000 residents of Newton County. We would ask that your questions be pertinent to the plan, the baseline ordinances, or the collaborative. We'd ask, too, that you not make statements via question. And we want to be professional about that so that our consultants can answer those questions and we can get down the road as far as possible. So if Caleb or Royce will join me back up here on this, I'll take the microphone over here and we'll dive in. So. If you have questions, if you could come over here and join me, then we'll address that. If you'll state your name, and I think for relevance, even for our elected officials that are here, if you'll state what district you're in, just so we have an idea. If you're East, West, District 1, 2.
I'm in District 3, Dennis Taylor. I live in North Newton. I just got back to Manhattan, Kansas. They have what you call a 2035 plan. Talking to people in Manhattan, they have the town center now. We walked the town center. Town center is dead. They said when it started out, developers came. But with time, developers either bankrupt or they moved away. Why would we be different than Manhattan, Kansas? Why would this plan?
Take a stab at that.
Well, I'm not familiar with Manhattan, Kansas, so I can't talk to you specifically about the provisions. One of the things I can say is that this plan is intended to make sure that if you have growth, that it is compatible with the plan. I'm not sure if that area had economic decline and all the businesses went away. But the idea here, as Hunter can attest to, is to create a baseline ordinance that is business friendly, that codifies the vision of your plan, and very importantly, makes it easy for developers who want to build according to the plan.
Phil and I are just discussing some process discussions, and I think to his point, he's concerned that to give voice the platform to discuss the, I guess fair to say, a pro TDR perspective, that he would love to be able to voice that on the other side. I think from our team's concern, is we put a plan together. I'm having this conversation with our family, Phil. Yeah. But I think, and I asked him, I said, can we take that to the Mansfield discussion? Because Royce will have a long, thorough explanation of that, and we can have that dialogue in that full context. And that would be my preference at this stage in the game, if that's okay.
That's okay, but they're not all directed at TDR.
Right.
A lot of them are directed at commercial and other aspects.
Can you put it in a question, and then I know you signed up for statement too.
Yeah.
Can we do that like that and just kind of stay consistent?
Yeah.
All right. How about a question form of that?
Okay. I guess my first question would be, I want to clarify, if we went to a cluster type development in an RU or CS zoning, and we can put all the units we can develop in one portion of it, and then put 80% of, at least 80% of the land in conservation, we're still limited to the 1 unit per 20 acres.
That's correct. You're limited to the development in the rural or conservation areas would be limited to the zoning density that is provided, which in our recommendation is 1 per 10 acres in the rural and 1 per 20 in the conservation.
Okay. But real quickly touching on the young man who wrote the ordinance, you said that we're going to get out of the business of government telling us how many parking spaces we can have. But is it not true in 11.1.2b that you create a maximum number of parking spaces that a business can have?
That is correct. That is in the draft ordinance. The maximums are actually well above what market would be today. If that is something that the local communities want to take out during the local customization, that's certainly at their prerogative.
Explain, that's a chamber question that we've thought about too. Explain the difference. I understand the minimum that a municipality would say need at least 100 parking spaces.
Yes.
What's the thought on a maximum?
So I want to point something out very important. This ordinance was written in such a way that we looked at the codes of the county and the codes of all the cities within it. Covington actually has a cap today. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. They have no parking minimum. So because that was a new idea to the county and one that we are seeing more and more communities nationwide look at, we felt that we would put that in. If that is something that the county, meaning Newton County, the unincorporated county, wants to take out, that would be their prerogative. It's already in the city of Covington, so when they customize the baseline, they will probably choose to keep that.
Right. Stay here for a second. Listen, if you have questions, go ahead and come over here in line. And if nobody has more questions, I know Phil's got a slew full, so I'm just going to let him keep rolling. But if other people, we'll just take, and he can go to the back of the line so we can get as many people as possible. Come on. Go ahead. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay, every time you ask a question, you got to go to the back.
Okay. I have a question more on the compact communities. I live in the Oak Hill area, and is there other communities that this plan has been based off of so that we can get an idea of what our communities might look like in the future? I know it seems like more of the focus is on the rural and the conservation areas, but When you talk about going from 350 units to 700 units, I'm having a hard time visualizing that and what that's going to look like.
That is an excellent point. So the question is, for those of you who aren't very familiar with the plan, the western part of the county is what we call a compact community. And we have proposed to create a series of 3 new residential districts and up to 5 new commercial and mixed-use districts that would be available potentially within that area. Some of them are already probably more appropriate for existing town centers like Covington. When we embarked on this process, we had a very extensive series of stakeholder inputs, and we asked people, what do you think about the nature of development occurring on the western part of the county today? We heard a lot of people who were very concerned about certain communities that had come in and put development in without sidewalks, or put development in without tree plantings, or put development in that was of a very low quality architecturally and construction-wise. And so what we did is we looked at developments that have gone in the county and other counties. For example, Clarks Grove, I think it's East Haven, work that's going on in portions of North Fulton, Cobb County, Henry County, and said, okay, what are the communities doing there that are creating higher quality, more compact, walkable development patterns as opposed to just subdivisions? And we took those and we actually coded for them. So when you read the compact community zoning, the general use district, you will see that there are provisions for sidewalks. There are provisions that say homes must face the street with stoops, porches, windows, and doors. There are provisions that talk about the relationship between the building and the street. There are even potential architectural provisions, which some people have said, these are very onerous, government is getting too far into the weeds. But at the same time, we've heard people mention specific developments that they don't like, and we have in fact coded to prevent those. So the idea is that within the western part of the county, you would have potentially higher development than what you have today, but you would get a town. You would get something like Clarks Grove. You would get something like some of the development you see in Milton, parts of Alpharetta, parts of Roswell, parts of Cobb County, parts of Henry County. Development that's really planned so that it isn't just housing, it has commercial that has walkability, it has more architectural character, and it really begins to raise the bar for development patterns.
Can I ask a clarification? In my earlier discussion before we started, one of the comments was, you're going to put that much density on the west part of the county, and Salem Road's already maxed out.
Yep.
How do you handle transportation corridors in that situation?
Absolutely. So if you think about Salem Road today, part of the reason that particular roadway is so congested is because there aren't a lot of ways to get around. If I am at Walmart and I want to go up to Kroger, I've got to go out, turn right on Salem Road, and go in. One of the things that this code says is that in the compact communities, new development, as it occurs and as it actually is required in the current Salem Road overlay, new development must have interconnected streets so that people can get from parcel A to parcel B without having to go on the roadway. Every time we add an additional way to get around, we make traffic flow that much better on the principal arterial. It's not how wide a roadway is that really determines how well it works or not. It's how many different routes are there. And so that Article 11, the article that talks about subdivision, actually has provisions in there that could incorporate those alternative ways to get around.
Thank you.
My question is that we're talking the county's going to be changed from what it is now. I mean, I've been where I'm at for better than 100 years. Our family has been there. And we're down there in what y'all call the conservation area. But my understanding is what dictates what you can get and not get for your developmental rights. Who's going to be the winner in that deal? Is it going to be the landowner or is it going to be the developer?
Good question.
I think that's a good question. I'm not sure I can give you an answer that will be totally satisfactory. But if you do it right, I think both the landowner and the developer will have benefits from it, and I think the community will have benefits from it. When you add development rights to property, I think the point that I'm trying to interpolate, I may ask you to come back and see if I've responded right. All zoning limits what you can do with your property. That happens now. It's happened since 1927 when the Supreme Court approved zoning. So zoning always limits what kind of uses you can make for your property and how much stuff you can put on your property. If you're, for instance, in an agricultural zone today, you're limited to 1 unit per 10 acres. And the kind of uses that you can make of the land is limited. Under the zoning that's proposed here, you would be able to build, again, 1 unit per 10 acres if you're in the rural area, 1 unit per 20 if you're in the conservation area. But the thing that's different from what is proposed here from the present system is that you would also have a development right for each 2.5 acres that could be transferred at a price that you and the buyer agree on. The buyer could then use that development right to increase the density to build the kind of communities that Caleb has been talking about in the other parts of the county.
Well, it sounds to me like the bottom line on this thing is that I give up my development rights for whatever, and that developer takes it over there and he can put more houses and stuff, which mean more money to him than me down there trying to make a living digging out of the ground. And then you say we can only do 10 acres to put a house on within a conservation area. We're going 20 acres. What if I wanted to leave my children something and they didn't want to look after 20 acres?
Well, I think one of the questions that we're going to be taking up, because I've heard this issue before, and I heard it in my county when we were doing this as well, is to make some kind of provision for family lots that could exceed the density, the base density of the zone. What Maryland has done statewide in our statewide conservation program is to allow up to 3 family lots. And we've done that in our county as well, is to allow up to 3 family lots, depending on the size of the farm, that can actually be an increase over the base density. And one of the things I want to test in this meeting and the other meetings is whether there is support for that kind of an approach, and if it makes sense and we can come to an agreement on what the level of number of units and acreages ought to be.
If I could make one statement in terms of, I know there's been some discussion of this plan, the appearances that it picks winners and losers. And to your question, who wins, the landowner or the developer?
Well, my question is, why aren't we running this thing like a referendum or something and let the county itself decide instead of 5 commissioners? I mean, I think it should be the people that should make the difference if they want something to do in the county.
Mr. Royce, you want to address that from zoning law?
I have no opinion on that.
Our position is...
Why not? We need answers to that question.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. It's been my understanding that...
Here, let them answer.
Well, they can talk to you one-on-one when we're done. Our position has always been that zoning has always been at the county level or the city level. That's always been their rights and responsibilities as part of their governing roles. This is no different in that respect.
This is a major deal. This is a major thing. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
Great point, and when we have public comment, you can address it. Questions?
Sure. How you doing, buddy? All right. First of all, before we get too far into this, I would like to say, based on one of your comments early on, y'all are objective in this proposition, the chamber. And y'all don't...
Ask a question, make a statement.
I'm asking you a question.
Okay.
Why does it not... It does not seem that you're objective. It seems like you are all in favor of this. Have you ever done a poll at the chamber to find out who's in favor and who's not?
Fair question. Our chamber board addressed that, had that discussion quite candidly. Our position on this is that we are in support of the 2050 plan in principle and in purpose. We've been at the table. We've been in dialogue with our partners that span 10 years of elected officials, 10 years of sewer authority, water authority, 10 years of development. And our official chamber position is that we support the education and information that are held in these 5 public sessions. We too, similar to many of you here, have concerns with TDR and free market and making sure those things are protected. At which point, version 2 draft is presented. The chamber board will then review and take a position based on version 2. Because this is version 1. We want the input, and we want both our business community, our industry, and our citizens to weigh in on this. That's the official position.
I guess I got you.
Well, you didn't ask
My
this
question is, you know, the people who did this to us in the 90s are the same people that are telling us that they're now going to save us. We had sufficient zoning to stop this. And the zoning is only as strong as the people who are enforcing it. We had a group of people who wanted to start developing the west side of the county to run water up there and not let anybody else get on the line. What I'm saying is, how can anybody ensure that the same group of people who did not have this much control are going to do any better than the last group of people who were influenced by the developers and were able to go do whatever they wanted to do? That is what our problem is. How can we solve that problem?
Fair question.
I think that's a fair question. It's a hard question. And I can basically refer you, I guess, to my own experience, which came out of a county that had made a lot of mistakes in the past in the way in which it had planned and zoned. We went through a long process, much as you're going through, and finally agreed on a general plan for our county. And we began to enforce it. One thing that we did was to develop the TDR program to protect our rural area. We, as that developed and as people, as the general public became more aware of the issues that were involved and provided the support for their public officials to stay behind the plan, that plan now is in its 50th year. And we have, we've fallen from grace a time or two. But for the most part, we have been able to maintain that plan because there's strong public support for it. And our public officials have felt that they have the confidence of the people in order to maintain the plan. I guess one of the things that I've told folks from time to time, if you're not happy with your political system, take a good hard look in the mirror. Because the people ultimately choose their government. And I've known a lot of politicians in my life, but I've not known a lot of them that survived very long going against the sentiment of the people. So the planning process is important because it informs the public and provides the kind of base that you want and the kind of base that public officials need to maintain a set of programs that ultimately serve the public.
Well, let's take some more questions. Yes, sir, please. Thank you. We got 5 more minutes, by the way, of Q&A, and then we'll turn to statements.
I'm in the 5th district. My question is this. I have 2 lots in the 5th district, 3.5 acres. I've got one at 2.89. Only one of them has a dwelling on it. Under your plan, you're telling me I can't build on my 2 remaining lots.
Actually, sir, if I may answer that, we have a running list of changes, and you have my word that that is actually in the version 2 of the code. It's actually in version 1. If you go to the section, Scott, do you remember the reference? I know we were talking about this earlier. Adam? In Article 15 of the code, you will see that right at the beginning, there is reference that says all lots of record have a right to 1 dwelling unit. So if you have a lot that is zoned and it goes to 20, it goes to 50 units an acre, whatever it goes to, we know that that is important, and we have put a provision in there that when we create the next version, we will actually write the language so that that is ensured. But it is in the version today in section 15, I believe page 15.1. You'll see it at the bottom in yellow.
That's a great question.
I would also be allowed to sell that property to
Yes,
somebody
sir.
else and they
Yes,
can
sir.
build on it?
Yes, sir. As written, a lot of record, which means a lot that is recorded on the county deed, can build a home on it.
We know that a lot of y'all have specific land questions just like that. When we're done, there's easels that are set up. We want to know every one of those questions because we want to give you answers back based on those codes. So please don't leave if you have specific land questions like that. It's great. Yes, sir.
A couple of questions. The first one, in the process sense, is there any thought about changing the format of these things? I think this is similar to something asked a bit earlier, in kind of a pro and con set where the opinion of one side is only at the moment formed in the question itself, and everything else is, just speaking from the plan. Is there an idea of having questions from the audience and a kind of a pro and con debate?
Fair question, and that's why I said at the beginning, hey, if this format doesn't work and you want to see something different, let's open it up. We just took a stab at the first one, and so we'll take that into consideration. Let's talk before you leave as to how it's best to do that.
I'd like to read a statement and then ask a question if that's permitted. I don't know how to do the statement question thing because it's joined to me. I can't split the realities here. I can run into it in the statement.
Would you?
But it's got a question.
It would be fair to Phil. I kind of cut Phil off on some of that.
Well, I can't ask the question.
Let's make a statement, and then we're going to give you a question at the end of statement time. Yes, sir.
Jeremy Hayes, District 1. My question is about the TRD easements. Let's say I sold my TRDs and the easement was placed on my property. How permanent would that be? What if I sell the property?
You can sell the property. The easement is in perpetuity and runs with the land.
Right, that's what I thought. Now, what if I did that, bought into it, sold the TRDs, the easements were placed on my property, and the 2050 plan was repealed in 10 years? Will those easements still be stuck to that property?
Your easements will continue. An easement in perpetuity is forever.
Thank you. Just cut that line and make it done. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm Eileen Slaughter. I'm in District 3. Based on this question, who pays the taxes on that easement for the rest of the time that that property is owned by that family? The property taxes, I mean, they can't sell the property, so they're required to pay. Well, even if they sell it, though, somebody's got to pay the property taxes on that. So
You pay. What happens when you sell the TDRs is, let's say, simply for purposes of illustration.
Well, she's just asking about the easement specific, not the TDR. Who pays property tax on the easement?
Well, there is no tax on the, generally no tax on the easement. The tax is on the property. So the property has an easement on it, which reduces the development potential. So the tax is essentially on what you can do on that property.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt. She is talking about the TDR. The actual transfer development right that is sold, does she, if she has 10 acres and she sells the transfer, if she has the TDR, does she tax it on those TDRs before she sells them?
That's a policy question that ultimately the county assessor will have to decide. I'm meeting with the assessors later this week to talk about it. I talked to our assessor in Montgomery County about how they handle it. And the way our assessors handle it is they place no value on the TDRs as that lay on the land. When the TDRs are sold, their tax is income. The sale price is tax as income. When the TDRs land and are recorded on another piece of property, then they're taxed on that property just the same way the zoning density would be taxed on that property.
You're basically making that property that you've transferred worthless.
No, the property from which you transfer is not worthless. It still has value, depending if you've kept the number of development rights that are permitted. It has the value of the land plus those development rights. If you sold off all the development rights, its value would still have be there for the uses that are permitted without a residence. For instance, it would still have farm value or forest value.
But you would choose, if you sold those development rights to that valuation, that would be your choice.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're lining up.
I'm Angie Hinton, and I live in the western side of the county. We know about the western side of the county. And I have a small piece of property, and my question is, okay, I'm getting older, and several times it's had contracts. What is going to be allowed? Talk about a town center. Where is the town center going to be? I understand about connecting roads and things like that. You know, we live in a subdivision. Years ago, they wanted to connect our subdivision to the silos, which we weren't in favor of, and probably still aren't in favor of, because the silos has a lot of, it doesn't have a good reputation. Sorry if anybody lives in the silos. I'm not, because I live next door to you.
What's your question?
My question is, what are they going to allow to be developed there? Because when you have a development comes in, and I want to try to, before I die, get something out of the property that I have. So what is going to be allowed in that area if you have small pieces of property?
Ma'am, may I ask, what are you zoned today?
It's commercial.
So you're zoned commercial today. So the idea is you are probably at a center or a corridor. The idea is if you are zoned commercial today, when we get to the point of mapping, we want to make sure we're all in agreement on the general districts.
I won't be dead.
Well,
I'm not going to be there.
no. By mapping, I mean, you know, assuming that we can get everyone to agree on the baseline ordinance. Assuming we can get everyone to agree on the baseline ordinance, we will show where those districts could go. And the idea is that if you are commercial today, you will continue to have commercial permission or greater when this code is adopted.
But when it's offered to be developed and the commissioners say no, and they give you a wrong answer, then I don't understand that. This is probably a statement. I don't understand that we have 5 drugstores that are developed in our community within walking distance, and we could have had a Family Dollar and a Dollar General, but they were compromised. I don't understand that.
Let's follow that up because it's a fair question.
Yeah,
and it's a good balance between government and free market. And how does that balance and how do the commissioners make those decisions? It's very good. I'll love to talk to you before you leave. We kind of beat that around. All right, Ricky, I'm going to give you the last question, and then we're going to start with Sam on statements. How is that fair? All right.
I'm Ricky Mock. I live in the eastern part of the county, District 1, but I own land all over the county, so I'm affected all kind of ways. My question is, if I lived on the west side, I wouldn't want another 200,000 people to be crowding in on the west side. And what about the water on the west side? The water on the west side is not imported, And I mean, they want to protect it down on the east side where I live. I'm proud of them for protecting my water. But the question is, can government handle our business better than we can handle our business? And do we want them being able to control the color of our houses, how many windows, how many porches, how many doors? Or do we want to control it ourselves with the zoning we already have?
Fair question. I'll kick it over to both of y'all, both from different perspectives.
Okay.
How do you balance?
If the county doesn't want to change, the county does not have to approve future zonings. However, as we have seen, with or without this plan, your county is going to have about 400,000 people by 2050. And the choice is not to shut the door. You cannot shut the door. You name one county in the United States that has successfully shut the door. So we have prepared a code that we believe reflects the 2050 plan vision of how to deal with that population that is coming. If the county wants to, more power to you, shut the door, but I have not seen it work. Now, to the question of control, I mentioned that this code has some potential architectural standards. You will notice that they are highlighted. We absolutely recognize that not every adopting government may be comfortable with that. But we heard a lady earlier who was concerned about the silos. These codes have been written to address some of the architectural concerns from that project, from the old Walker's Bend in Covington, and a few other developments that we have heard people tell us they don't want any more of. And so if you are comfortable allowing that, if you believe that the right of a developer to build what they want is more important than the right to mitigate impacts on the adjacent property, the code can be written accordingly.
I just echo what Caleb said. You as citizens and your government can plan as you think. You can guide development in a better way than it has been in the past, or you can decide not to do that and let her rip. And if that makes you happy, then do it. If you think there's a better way, then it makes sense to try to do the better way. Planning and government is not something that is frozen in amber. You would expect, I think, over time to make improvements and corrections. But as Caleb said, no jurisdiction that he knows of, or nor any that I know of, has successfully said, thank you very much, we just don't want any more.
I will simply weigh in from the chamber standpoint in regards to economic development to that question, because that's a very sensitive issue for us, is what is the role the government plays versus free market. And we're obviously a free market organization. The tension that we live in is our tax rate. And how do we continue to recruit business and retain industry and small business owners at a low tax digest? And there's the delicate balance right here that we're hearing tonight, is you have the private citizens saying, like this lady that was right here, who said, I might die before 2050. There you go. Who says, hey, what about, I've got rights to develop highest and best use based on current government zoning. Well, your highest and best use will always have impacts on the taxpayers. When the development came to the western side or when Walmart hit, who paid for the road improvements? Who paid for the traffic lights? 100,000 Newton County residents did. And that landowner sold, the developer made his money, and we left to help balance that. Now that's always been the case. When Lockwall, going to the east side, when Lockwall development was put in, who paid for the road improvements on 278 and the traffic light at Elk Skull Road? Newton County citizens did. So it's a delicate balance in this discussion between free market and the private sector and the public sector, and how those monies are balanced and paid. And that's one of the things that we're continuing to push. Into your question, why is the chamber engaged at this level? Part of it is we believe that the plan really is significant tax savings over the life of the plan. And that is a strong recruiting tool for us as we recruit industry. It's not perfect, and that's why we want to wait and see and develop it. So, fair question. It's a great tension, and that's why this time is so valuable for you guys to come in and weigh in and have our elected officials here. So, all right, we're going to transition into statements. All right, so statements, you got 2 minutes. Can you be my clock? You have a watch? All right. We're going to 2 minutes, say whatever you want. I will ask that you be professional. We're not going to name call. We're not going to make it personal. If that's the case, we'll turn the mic off. We'll go to the next person. But we're all big boys and girls. We can handle that. So first, I have six people that checked to sign. Dennis Taylor, Jack Spears, Phil Johnson, Steve Brown. Ricky, you signed, but you didn't have a check mark. Do you want to speak? I figured you did. All right, and Ricky Mott. So, Mr. Sam, start us off.
I can do it with or without the microphone.
Let's do it with. That way I can take it away and feel good about it.
All right. Well, first of all, I had some statements to make, but every time they answer a question, I come up with more questions for them that I can turn into more statements. Maybe we could just do a quick TDR thing here. All of you who would give up your 2 minutes for me to continue to speak, raise your hands.
You're using your time.
Thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Hanson, your response to the taxes didn't make any sense to me at all. They're not going to take any value off of my property, but they're going to tax John Doe for the additional value that he's getting from me. If he's getting taxed more for the value, why wouldn't I get a reduction in my value? Okay, see, I don't understand that. But there's a lot of things at this point I don't understand. Okay. You brought up the Supreme Court in 1927. I would also like to bring up something that came to mind when you said that. The Supreme Court also ruled that in zoning, if the zoning is not fair for everyone, it's not fair for anyone. Okay? I just want to make that point. I know that sounds a little like Martin Luther King. Okay. If you are familiar with Oregon's zoning, they got tired of people from California coming up there. Are y'all familiar with that at all? What they have done, it is my understanding, is they have passed a law that in order to get an exemption or an exception, you've got to go to the Capitol. Now, if we had done that here in the 90s, we wouldn't have this problem, because every big developer and every money man that came here wanting an exemption or wanting an exception, they got it. And that's why I brought up the problem that we have with no matter what we do, if the people do not force the government to do what they're supposed to do based on the regulations, then we got nothing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was right at 2 minutes. Appreciate it.
Hey, what I would, in 2 minutes is difficult because this is very complicated and a very large plan. I think the first thing that you've got to look at in this plan are the densities in the rural and conservation districts. Those are really earth-changing for people that own land there. I like the idea, Royce, that y'all talked about maybe changing that. I like the idea you're talking about a family exemption because that makes it a little more palatable. I think the DTCs have got to come out too. Real quickly, what the DTCs are, if you want to sell your development rights, a developer can either come to you and negotiate to buy those, or they can circumvent that and go to the county and pay a penalty, in effect, and get those same bonus densities. That just throws out the market quality of the TDRs. I think that the TDRs we are being told that the large densities are not confiscatory because we have the TDRs as an alternative. But bear in mind, that is a free market system. Until we have a demand for the bonus densities in the receiving areas, those TDRs aren't going to have much market value. And we really need to consider that because we're only going to get one TDR for 2.5 acres. Bear that in mind, and then if those don't have any value, if you can't readily find a purchaser who wants to exceed the bonus densities in the receiving areas, then you don't have anything to sell because you don't have a market for anybody to buy. Perfect. Let's go.
Hey, man, you get back in line. I think we got time.
Dennis Taylor again. When my wife and I went out hunting a place to live, hunting property, we didn't want to live right next to each other. I mean, to someone else.
You and your wife?
No.
Okay. My wife thinks that's okay.
So what we did, we went out and bought 10 acres, house in the middle. We didn't need government to come in here and tell us how to go about not living close to somebody. Why do we need it now? We're all grown. We're human. We should be able to handle that ourselves. And I'll ask this question again. It's been asked about 3 times. I'll put it as a statement. We haven't got answers. Why don't you put this on a referendum and let the people vote on it? If the plan is good, they'll vote on it, they'll put it in. You won't have as many problems with lawsuits and stuff like that will come if you just throw it in there. So why? I know y'all can't answer that. We have elected officials in here. Will anyone commit to putting this on the ballot when it's finished? Like it should be.
Thank you. Ricky.
Ricky Mock. When the gentleman was talking about the 3 family lots, what if I have 5 kids? Some of my kids are going to get left out. That makes an enemy out of me. If I have 7 kids, that's not right. You're going to pick 3, so who's going to be the losers? It's like the losers in the winter in this county. Some people's going to win greatly by this process. The people that's already established 700 lots or bought lots all over the county and are controlling them lots, they're going to win. They're going to be big winners on this plan. But the poor folks and the people that live from day to day are going to be the big losers. Because I'm going to put my land in conservation, and I'm not going to pay no taxes hardly. And the people on the west side, or where the high density are going to be the ones paying all the taxes. So the poorer you are, the more taxes you're going to have to pay. The richer you are, you're going to have big lots of land and not have to pay any taxes. So how's the county going to run the county? How are they going to get enough money to run the county if 62% of the county is being taxed at a very low rate? Because they want to put 62% of the land in conservation. So somebody's going to have to pay all that money to keep running it. And if we get 200,000 more people here, somebody's going to be taxed to the hill. We're already one of the highest taxed counties in the United States now. And it's only going to get worse. What's going to happen when they move all the growth over to one area and all the shopping centers and stores build over there around these people, and in a few years there's no more place for more businesses to come in because they're limited to what they can do there and it's all grown up? Well, then we're not going to be getting any new businesses. There's not going to be any more income to the county. So where's the income going to come from? Out of each one of your pockets and our children's pockets. That's, if our kids want to buy a piece of land, are they going to be able to afford to buy 20 acres and live on a 20-acre tract and build a 2,200 square foot house? Or are they going to have to live in one of these postage stamp lots that some of the rich folks have already set up and declare that that's where you've got to go.
Thank you, Ricky.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Pirate Steve. I want to read a statement that I came across from a woman named Jane Jacobs in a book called The Life and Death of Great American Cities. To approach a city, or even a city neighborhood, as if it were a larger architectural problem, capable of being given order by converting it into a disciplined work of art, is to make the mistake of attempting to substitute art for life. The result of such profound confusion between art and life are neither art nor life. They are taxidermy. I asked the question how we came to the idea of having 89% of the population of the county forced to live in kind of Disneyland Lego block compact villages. Disneyland is a nice place to visit. I'm not sure I want to live there. Second, on the percent of the county under the restricted zoning elements here. This is not an exhaustive research by any means, but I did some Google searches. You're all capable of doing that yourselves on other counties that have done TDR programs and similar. Montgomery County, Maryland being one, some in Washington, Florida. The highest percent under control of the county that I found was 29%, which is not even half the 67% being proposed for this county. And one has to wonder why. Why are we being so massively ambitious in this control? Is it necessary? Which kind of leads into the final thing I guess I want to say. One point is population. This whole plan is based on an idea of the massive growth that took place in the last decade. Current U.S. Census Bureau statistics for 2010 pegged the population here just under 100,000. They estimated by the Census Bureau in 2013, July, the population was about 102,000, 103,000. It was about 2.5% growth. If you project that out to 2050, it comes out to about 255,000. A gentleman named Eben Fodor in a book called Better Not Bigger postulated and has examples of communities like Portland, Oregon, for example, where the local municipalities, regional governments have taken upon themselves to just limit growth by either removing simple things, like removing incentives in some fashions, or perhaps imposing scale impact development fees. That you can, this plan already assumes we're going to limit it at 400,000 because we don't have water for more than that. So we already have the principle that we're going to cut it off. Well, if quality of life means something, why not cut it off lower? Or if the natural growth really only turns out to be 255,000, do we even need all of this? Finally, I would say, given the scale of this, the questions of this, it is unconscionable to me that we would try to carry this forward without a public referendum, and maybe even, this is a wonderful option A, what's option B? And have a vote on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Great discourse and dialogue. It is 8:07. We will be here. We'll have volunteers in the hallway directly behind me who will be capturing more questions. Ricky Mock, you raised a question about 3-unit or 3-family. What if I got 7? Bring that suggestion. What would you suggest? How would you do it? Direct siblings, birth certificates, things like that. Bring those kind of ideas to the volunteers. They'll post them up there. If you have other concerns about your development and zoning, I know Caleb will be here. TDR questions, Mr. Royce will be here. Please don't leave without being able to voice your concerns, your questions, your suggestions, and your opinions. And lastly, if you have ideas about a better forum, let us know. We want to do that. And last but not least, please, any of your comment cards, your question cards, your statement cards, if you'll bring those to me, we'll take them up. We'll start categorizing them and make this a better presentation, more fluid. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.